Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Today we are going to go over maintenance procedures for our 12-volt Beckett burner. This is an ADC model. This is utilized on Stratos distributor trailers and skid mounted units. We'll go over some of the parts, the basic hand tools that you'll need to do maintenance on this unit. So we'll start off from the front here and we'll go over the parts. Here on the front we've got a retention head. You'll see the nozzle sits inside and the electrodes on top of that. This is the air tube combination. Here you'll see your fuel solenoid that runs into the igniter assembly on the housing of the burner. And here you'll see your PhotoCAD, your springs for your igniter, which touch on the electrodes here, and that's how it gets spark. Inside you've got the motor and the fan, and just underneath that is a coupler, and we'll show you that when we pull out the fuel pump. Here is your fuel pump, your air bands for adjusting air inlet, and that's how you control the flame, fuel pressure gauge, and some of the basic hand tools that you'll need here are a 5/16 socket, a 3/8 socket, an extension and a ratchet, flathead and Phillips head screwdriver, number 2 Phillips, 7/16 wrench, and a 5/8 wrench. So we'll just start from the beginning here and show you the inside. We'll take the 7/16 wrench and undo our fuel line. This just disconnects here from the fuel tube. That'll allow us to pull our fuel pump off. We're going to use a 3/8 wrench, or socket, I'm sorry. Undo these 2 bolts. There's one here, and there's one right over here. Take those 2 out. Unplug our fuel solenoid. This will allow us to pull our fuel pump right out. You'll see the coupler is attached to that on one side. It only goes in one way. There's a flat spot on it. This coupler attaches to the fuel pump and to the blower motor on the inside. If this coupler is not attached, there's no way for the fuel pump to spin and it won't operate. So you just make sure that's attached on both sides, and when it spins the blower motor, the coupler spins as well. And we are all attached. So go ahead and put that back in. There's 2 bolts hold it in there. Now our fuel pump is reattached. Let's go ahead and snug that up. Inside this little package here, you'll see a little plug. This is a fuel bypass plug. So when you have 2 fuel lines, one for inlet and one for return, the bypass plug needs to be installed, and there's a nice little instructional booklet. The bypass plug gets put in this port right under here when you're first setting up the burner. Now we'll move on to the igniter assembly back here. You'll see the PhotoCAD. This eye right here sees the flame while the burner's burning, and it cuts off the sparker so that it doesn't prematurely wear that out. So this thing, you'll see, sometimes gets clouded up with soot. We just got to make sure that that's always cleaned out. Gets put right back in here, and as long as that's working properly, the igniter will stop sparking once the flame starts. I'll hook my fuel line back up. And inside here is the 2 sets of electrodes. They go all the way forward with the fuel tube where the fuel nozzle sits in. So you got 2 screws here for the front on the retention head. You take them out and remove the retention head. This is where you'll need your 5/8 wrench. You come in, unloosen this. This is your fuel nozzle. You can be careful not to move the angle of the electrodes. There is a tool to set those if they do get moved. You can pull your fuel nozzle out, clean it up with some diesel fuel, blow the screen out with some compressed air, or put a new one in, and you thread it right back in. You just check your electrodes, make sure they're clean and that they're adjusted properly right in front of the fuel nozzle. When you tighten this back in, you got to give it a good snug tightening so that you avoid any drips coming out of the fuel nozzle between the fuel tube and the nozzle itself. We call it good and tight. That's snug back up. Put your retention head back on and line up the two holes. Put your screws back in. That's where the number 2 Phillips comes in handy. Tighten those right back down. Now your retention head is reinstalled. Now that you've ensured that everything's cleaned out inside of your blower chamber, your electrodes are set, your fuel nozzle's back on, your retention head's back on, you come over, close the lid to the igniter. Make sure none of the wires are pinched down in here, they're sitting there nice and flush. Close that down, set that, and then you just give those 2 nuts of these 2 bolts a little snug up to keep that tray on. That secures the lid to the igniter assembly. And right over here, once you hook your burner up to your machine and you have the power on and it starts burning fuel, you'll see these 2 bands. There's an adjustment band on the outside with a little bolt here. This tightens the outer band. There's one here and there's one on the bottom. Those are also 5/16 or a flathead screwdriver. Once you loosen those, this outer band is adjustable. There's numbers on the side of the housing here to relate to where you're at. So this controls airflow from the outside, and then there's another band on the inside to control more airflow. And you move this up and down, and this allows more air to flow into the chamber and allow for a richer or leaner fuel burn. Once you've got that burning without any smoke, no white smoke, no black smoke, it should just be clean vapor, you know that you're at the right setting. Fuel pressure gauge here will allow you to see what fuel pressure you're running at. The pump pressure is set to 140 psi from the factory. If you notice that you're getting excessive smoke, you can cut the fuel pressure back a little bit and save your rate with this screw here. So left is to decrease the pressure, right is to increase the pressure. There's a couple of bolts right over here. This will undo your motor housing, and the whole motor and fan assembly pulls out if you want to take that apart and clean it up. And other than that, everything is ready to go. So once again, 12 volt Beckett burner, model ADC. Typical maintenance items that you'll have to cover are to keep the fuel nozzle clean and the air tube combination assembly, your electrodes, and your photo eye on the inside. Clean all these items up. Make sure that your coupler is connected from the fuel pump to the motor, and that'll ensure the maximum operating range for this burner itself. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys.